Hello, this is Satya from Robite, and I'm here to talk about the new plugin Aura. What exactly is Aura? Aura is a reimagination of the classic Radio Waves plugin for After Effects. Think of Aura like a procedural particle system, but instead of rendering small points all over the place, it creates vector-like shapes that change over time, like the Radio Waves plugin. Now it's very simple and a lot of fun to play around. Let's go ahead and create a new composition, and let's create a new solid. Let's go and apply Aura. Now by default you can see that there are these circular shapes that are created in 3D space. Let's go ahead and create a new camera. As you can see, these waves, let's call them waves, these are 3D camera aware, and you have a single producer point. Right now it's at the center of the composition. You can change it, change the position, and you can also change the shape. Right, by default it's this circular shape. You can make it more like a polygon, and you can also make it a star, control the star depth, or you can increase the curvature, and you can have more than 4 sides. For example, you can have 16 sides. Let's zero out the curvature, turn off the star, and you're not bound to just use the polygon. This is nice to have, but you can also use an After Effects mask, for example. Let's create a new mask here, and let's change the radio wave tape from polygon to mask, and make sure to select the mask. Now if you have multiple masks, you can use all paths, but you only have one mask here, so we're just going to select the one mask. And you can use this mask to create waves in 3D space. Now you have a lot of settings here that you can control, but now let's get to the basics first. There is this control here called frequency. What exactly is frequency? Frequency is the number of waves that the plugin generates per second. So the higher the number is, the more number of waves that are generated in 3D space. And the lower it is, the less number of waves are generated. Now Aura really lets you crank this up really high. You can have really high frequency so that you can have really dense looking waves here. For example, you can crank this all the way to 100, 200, and you have this really dense looking structure. And it still renders pretty fast. Now once you start playing around, you see it's a lot more fun. You can have a little bit of spin so that kind of waves are spun over time. So everything happens here over time. So the waves are born and then they're gradually changed over time. Now you can set a start size. Right now the start size is 0 because when the waves are born, they're of 0 size, and when they're end of the lifespan, they're of the end size. So every setting here has a start and an end. For example, there's a start size and an end size, and there is a start thickness and an end thickness. And you can also have a color gradient that can be applied over time. It starts with the green, goes to this blue, and ends with this pinkish red. You can add more colors if you want, or remove them if you want, and you can sort of get the idea here. And there is also this thing called fade out. So right now everything just looks very sharp and very hard edged. So if you add a bit of fade in and fade out, these kind of let you smooth out the ends a little bit so that waves look a lot more organic and natural. And right now the frequency is really high, and if you turn it down, you can start seeing individual waves, for example. And you can control the thickness. It starts at 2 and ends at maybe higher, so that the lines get thicker over time if you want. And there is a few things that are very important. For example, the lifespan. What exactly is the lifespan? Lifespan is the time in seconds that each wave exists. So after they're born, a wave exists for, in this case, 10 seconds. If you increase this, the lifespan gets extended a lot later, so 20 seconds. So everything happens over a longer time span. Let's set this back to 10. And there is the velocity. How fast do these waves move? The faster it is, faster waves move. Now, a lot of this depends. For example, you have a lot of waves here that are moving really fast, or you want to slow down. There's this other thing you control too. It's called the time factor. Time factor is how time internally is calculated inside the effect, unrelated to the composition. So if you have the time factor, let's set this velocity back to 100. And if you want to speed this up or slow this down, if you change the time factor, everything happens a little faster. So if you put it at 2, internally the time runs at twice the speed. And if you want it to happen slower, you can set it to 0.5 or anything less than 1. So everything happens a lot slow speed. Now you can keyframe this, and you can actually stop at a certain point if you want and resume it later. Kind of freezes the whole thing. And the other thing that's different from radio waves is you have a lot more things to play around here. And there's this thing called render quality. What is render quality? So by default, Aura renders everything a little bit noisy. That's expected, because I think the noise adds a little bit to the style of the plugin, and the noise really works with this really thin, less than 1 pixel lines that can be drawn in high frequency renders. So you can control the render. The higher it is, the less noisy the render becomes. Right now we are at 8, which is actually not that noisy. And if you put it to 1, it gets a little more noisy. And if you put it to like 100, then it's almost, you can't see any speck of noise. So adjust this render quality depending on the scene you have. And usually when you're working, you might want to set this to a lower quality. Like by default it's 8. I think that's a good balance. And if you want a high quality render, make sure to crank this up. And if you have a camera, you can use the depth of field. For example, just set the depth of field to on and make sure to turn on the depth of field, and you have a nice depth of field. And you can control the blur factor to crank up or crank down the depth of field, irrespective of what you have in the camera, in the layer camera here. And that's the basics of Aura. And hope you guys like Aura. And if you have any further questions or anything, please let me know. And thanks for watching. Thank you.